Good morning, everyone. If I could ask everyone to please find your seats so we can begin the program. Good morning and welcome to the third annual breakfast of Jewish Family Services of Passaic Clifton. Before we start our program, I would just like to take a few moments to acknowledge the presence of a few people. First, I would like to thank all the Reish Yeshiva, Rabbanim, and community leaders who have taken time out of their busy schedules to join us here this evening. This morning. I'm used to doing dinners. In particular, though, I would like to thank and acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Herb Klein, who is here with us this morning. I would also like to thank Assemblyman and Council President Gary Sher for being with us. And I would like to introduce someone who many people have not yet had the opportunity to meet, but our new mayor, Mayor Hector Laura, is here with us this morning. Our devoted executive director, Mrs. Esther East, recently had a grandson, and she is therefore out of town to celebrate the bris. And we wish Mrs. East and her family a tremendous mazel tov and hakaras hatov for all that she does for the organization. I would like to also publicly thank all of my fellow board members who serve on the board of directors of JFS. Their commitment to JFS is a testament to how important this organization really is to our community. But I must take just a few seconds to give a special thank you and acknowledgement to our board president, Ms. Fran Lichtenstein. Fran's leadership and wisdom have truly been instrumental to the growth of our organization. Thank you. Whenever there is an event as large and, thank God, as successful as this, there are many people that are instrumental and who need to be thanked. However, I just want to name 6 individuals who spent untold hours working to make this breakfast the success that it is. First of all, board member Mrs. Sarah Ginsberg. I would like to thank her, as well as her chief lieutenants, Mrs. Allison Sage and Mrs. Dina Leiter. There are many employees, volunteers of JFS who are critical to the organization's success. But when it comes to this breakfast, I have to point out 3 individuals in particular. I would like to publicly thank, for their hard work and efforts, Mrs. Michelle Welikoff, Mrs. Chaya Wilkes, and Ms. Robin Rakin. Finally, a tremendous thank you to everyone here in this room and to the entire Passaic Clifton community. The overwhelming support that JFS has received during this campaign has really been breathtaking. There's no other word to describe the feeling that members of the campaign committee, members of the board of directors, and all those involved feel when we see the outpouring of support, whether it's financial, whether it's just the words of appreciation for all that JFS does. So thank you to the entire community. I would now like to call upon David Spector to make a presentation to our first honorees, Rabbi and Rebbitzin Weissman.
Good morning. It is my kavod to introduce Rabbi and Rebbitzin Weissman as this morning's Somech Achim honorees, 2 individuals that are truly deserving of this recognition. Rabbi Weissman has served continuously as the Mashgiach Ruchni of the Yeshiva Gedola of Passaic for over 40 years. Rebbitzin Weissman began teaching the local children and assumed her position as the principal of Benos Bracha, the girls' division of the Yeshiva Katana, since its founding. The Weissmans have been pioneers in building Moshes HaChinuch in our community for the better part of 40 years. They have been leading the way for their numerous students and community families. Rabbi and Rebbetzin Weissman are consummate mechanchim. They directly impart Torah and Yiras Shamayim to their students, and they are tremendous role models of Midas Tovos. The Weissmans have a deep appreciation for the complexity of the human beings, for the infinite combinations of good midos and those that need improvement, strengths and weaknesses. Their keen understanding is combined with an unusually large dose of avos abrios. They carefully decipher this complex human composition and lovingly provide the tools for growth. Avos Yisrael is as natural to them as breathing is to the rest of us. It is the very essence of the Weissman-Schwab heritage, their illustrious families, that incorporates the values of old-school European Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshivas, and Mashgichim. The Alter from Slobodka, Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, taught his Talmidim Gadlus HaOdam, the greatness of man. He had a legendary understanding of the human psyche and believed that by polishing their characteristics of his students, they would aspire to become great in all areas. He used to teach, do not try to be great, rather strive to be complete, and greatness will follow. With this philosophy of chinuch, Rabbi and Rebbetzin Weissman's Talmidim Talmidos can trust and rely on their advice that they are being treated with the utmost of care. A hallmark of their approach is their sense of achrayus, responsibility. They accept the responsibility to meet each individual's educational needs within a framework of overall health in body and mind. Indeed, these are values that are extended to each and every person they encounter. At times, the scope of a person's needs has to be addressed by other professionals, and the Weissman's long-standing relationship with the Jewish Family Service was established to strengthen, enhance, and heal. Striving for comprehensive harmony in all areas of personal and communal life is a prime Torah objective, and we are extremely fortunate in the Clifton community to be able to rely upon our Rabbanim and the Jewish Family Service who share this lofty goal. It is impossible to evaluate the bracha of having the Weissmans live their daily lives in our community. Their support of Somech Achim and the Jewish Family Service is a manifestation of their very being. Honoring them this morning is but a token of the hakaras hatov we owe them for the years of quiet and humble influence on the growth and well-being of our community. On behalf of the entire community, we wish Rabbi and Rebbetzin Weissman continued good health, nachas from their family, and the strength to continue their avodas hakodesh for the Clifton community and all Klal Yisrael. May Hashem grant you both hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yedechem. Rabbi Weissman.
Thank you, Reb David, for your kind words. Our relationship goes back to the very early years of our Yeshiva Gedola. Reb David came from San Antonio to be a bacher in our yeshiva. And to this very day, he spends an hour in the yeshiva in the mornings before he goes to his office. Yasher Koyach. Baruchim Habayim. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who came to this morning's breakfast in our honor. Likewise, all those who placed an ad in the journal in our honor. Es asher yeshnei payimanu hayayim, asher nenu payimanu hayayim, atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem kulchem hayayim. Although the driving force behind this morning's event is to raise funds for our unique community organization, Jewish Family Service, and Somech Achim, but there really is a more significant reason for us to be here this morning. Today's breakfast is in essence a Sudas Haidah. Chesed organizations would have a Suda from time to time. One of the most well-known is the Chevra Kadisha on a Zion Adar would make a Suda. This Suda served as a Sudas Haidah for the past as well as a source of chizuk for the future. The Chavetz Chaim relates a remarkable story about a Gemach free loan organization in his time. One of the many details in their bylaws was to host a Suda for the members in the week preceding the Kriyas HaTorah of Parshas Mishpatim. Because in the Parsha you have the pasuk in Kesef Talva es Ani es Ami Imach, es Ami Ani Imach. A positive mitzvah say, the Rambam Sefer Mitzvahs is mitzvah 197. Today's Suda falls out in the week of Parsha Shmos, where we are told about two individuals who put themselves out to the extent of Sakonas Nefashis for Klal Yisrael. Shifra and Pua defied the explicit instructions of the king. He ordered them to kill all the boys being born. They paid no attention to Para Melech Mitzrayim, but rather had Yeshira Shemayim for Melech Malchei HaMelachim. Their true names were Yocheved and Miriam, mother and daughter, but because of their specific missions, they were called Shifra and Pua, as Rashi explains. Truly a Jewish family that rewarded a service in Mitzrayim for Klal Yisrael. Our own Jewish family service, some 3,412 years later, follows in their footsteps. The Torah tells us of the immediate reward of Shifra and Pua by Yetev Elokim Lam Yaldos. Says the Malbim, Hashem Nosan Schoram Boilam Hazeh B'toivas Oilam Habo. B'toivas Oilam Hazeh. Furthermore, the everlasting reward, Vayas Lehem Botim, and Rashi told us they were Zoicha to have descendants who will become Batei Kuhuna, Batei Leviah, Patei Malchus, all of whom were to be the future leaders of Klal Yisrael for generations to come. So too may all of us merit those same brachas for being partners in the work of JFS. Klal Yisrael always had organized chesed groups. The women in the European shtetls would go from house to house, collecting feathers to make bedding for needy kalas. This was the forerunner of today's Hachnosas Kala organizations. Likewise, they were the volunteers known as Linas HaTzedek. They would spend the night with the choiler, relieving the family members, the forerunner of today's Bikur Choilim. A group known as Chevra Demei Eitzin will be responsible to see that the poorer families in the city would have firewood for the winter months. The list goes on and on. Our organization provides social services for the families of our community. This is in fact the highest form of chesed. The Rabbi Glasser tells us, "Hanoisem pruta la'anim is barach b'sheish brachas." One who gives tzedakah to a poor man is blessed with 6 complete brachas. V'amafaisei b'dvarim mizbarach ba'achas esri brachas. While one who consoles and encourages a fellow person is blessed with 5 additional brachas. Our organization addresses the emotional needs and the well-being of the person himself. This is known as Chesed B'Nefesh. To all the staff members of JFS, the supporters, all its volunteers, we say Chazak, Chazak. If we will be strong consistently, V'nis Chazek, we will then be granted in Hashemayim success in the future. Bracha v'atzlacha b'avodas HaKodesh. Thank you all for listening. Have a good day.
Good morning. Today's guest of honor are Malkiel and Tova Nechamkin. The Nechamkins have been living in Passaic Clifton for over 20 years, and they've been pillars of our community for many of those years. Both Malkiel and Tova give generously from their time, their money, and their other resources to assist individuals and organizations both within our community and outside of our community. Whenever there's a call for help, whether financial or otherwise, the Nechamkins are always one of the first people to respond to that call. For a good few years, their home was the warehouse and staging center for Tomchei Shabbos, even installing refrigerators and freezers lining their basement to house all that food. And still today, even though Tomchei Shabbos has its own facility, not only are they active board members, but to a large degree, they are Tomchei Shabbos. In addition, they have and they do open their home for other organizations. I've been there a number of times. Recently, I actually asked Malkiel to lend his support to an organization from out of town, and I was humbled by his responsiveness, his support, and his commitment. They are true role models for us, how to do real chesed, how to give tzedakah, and how to do it b'hatznei aleches. Through their work within the community, the Nechamkins have an intimate and strong pulse of the communal and individual needs of the community, and in this role, they've been active partners for JFS. Knowing the Nechamkins in their quiet, sneistic way, I'm certain that they'd much rather be in the shadows right now and not in the limelight. But in all honesty, there really isn't a more deserving couple than the Nechamkins to receive this honor. May Hashem bless them that they should continue to be able to give. They should be able to continue their holy work for the Klal for many more years in good health, and they should have only nachas from their children. Please join me in honoring Mr. and Mrs. Malkiel Nechamkin. I'd like to call Moshe Lukins and Yaakov Briskman to join me on the podium.
There is now a video presentation from Rabbi Sachs in honor of the Nechamkins. Please direct your attention to the video screens.
The Mishnah in the fourth parak of Pirkei Avos explains the name of Rabbi Shimon, that there are three different crowns, that of Torah, Kahuna, and Malchus. The Tashbes explains that that corresponds to an earlier Mishnah that tells us the name of Shimon HaTzadik, that the world rests on three pillars, that of Torah, Avoda, and Gemilus Chasadim. And this is even true when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash. There are many different kelim, vessels that are used for Avodas Hamikdash. The Torah is represented by that of the Aron and the Menorah. The Mizbachos represent that of service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avoda, and the Shulchan, the Ramban writes, embodies Gemilus Chasadim. And just as one finds in the Mikdash that those various kelim, the Aron, the Mizbeach, the Shulchan, has a zer, a crown, the same thing is true when it comes to each individual. The three crowns that Rabbi Shimon mentions, that of Torah, Kahuna, and Malchus. The Mishnah, however, continues and tells us that there is an additional crown, and that is a Keser Shem Tov, the crown of an appropriately good name. And the obvious question raised by the Machzor Vitri is, in total then, there are four crowns. Why is it that the Mishnah says there are only three? The Machzor Vitri and Chosid Yavitz answer that Shem Tov is not an independent crown, but rather it is a sum, it is a composite of all of the other crowns. When you excel in areas of Torah, Avoda, and Gemilus Chasadim, then necessarily you're able to wear the Keser Shem Tov. The Nechamkins, Malkiel, and Tova, this year's honorees, certainly embody these virtues and these values. Throughout the Kehillah, they're active in every facet of Chesed, supported of so many of the most Satorah of our Kehillah. My relationship with them is one that spans years. Baruch Hashem, I was a Rebbe to their children, and it's a special personal privilege to be able to wish them a Birchas Mazel Tov on this especially deserved honor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless them, grant them with nachas from their children, abundant bracha, and intense siyata dishmaya.
Please enjoy the buffet in the back.
If everyone could direct their attentions to the video screens. Thank you.
Good morning, Jewish Family Service.
My son, he's just not interested in going to shul or learning anymore.
My father is aging, and I just don't know how to tell him that he can't drive anymore.
My husband, no matter what I do, he just won't give me a get.
I just lost my job and I don't have health insurance.
My daughter just can't function in school anymore. The teacher says she has no friends.
My husband, I found him on the internet.
At Jewish Family Service, we create a safe place for people to have these difficult conversations. A place that understands that it is not their fault, it's not who they are, it's something that has happened to them, and that with the right help, they can move forward.
I was drowning, and I was able to swim ashore to JFS. I leaned on them for a long time, and Baruch Hashem, I'm in a so much better place, and I'm really grateful.
The Weissmans are the ultimate chesed team. The jobs that they have, Rebbe Weissman, Menahelas, Reb Nosson is the Mashgiach, lend themselves to doing chesed with the tzibur all day, all night, always.
Today, we face challenges. As soon as we sense a situation that calls for intervention, our first stop is at JFS. I am in awe of their dedication, expertise, and of course, their discretion. Every case is treated with the utmost warmth and genuine care. I continue to observe and listen closely as the social workers reach out to us. May the Rabbi Shalom grant this worthy institution much siyat d'shmaya, and may we be zocher to the geula and no longer suffer from the sorrows that require their intervention.
One thing that always really amazes me about JFS are their case managers. I don't know how many hours they're supposed to work a week, but I think they all work around 24 hours a day. All the case managers are professional, but they deal with their clients in a way that's personal. Each one's a Jew who they really care about. They're there for the whole family, for each aspect that the family needs.
If we didn't have a JFS, we'd have to build it from scratch. And instead of having to build it from scratch, we have an organization that has tremendous professional depth and a very broad array of services that allows them to offer so much and do so much for the community. There are very few places where you can have a psychiatrist working with a case manager, working with therapists, working even with vocational services, really to provide everything in a holistic sense for people who are in need, facing challenges in their lives.
Akil and Tovin Chamkin, they really care about every individual and every mercy in town. And I know from personal experience that although they're very quiet people, a lot gets accomplished in that house.
We have this organization, and now it's up to us in the community to really provide the support to keep it going and to help it grow and become an even more important part of our community.
One of the things that was most compelling to us about JFS was really the extent to which the agency was being relied upon by the community as sort of the preeminent chesed organization in town, with hundreds of families relying on the agency for help and assistance, and really getting them through their daily lives. Whether it's Somech Achim and helping those who are frankly most in need, or the food pantry, making sure that people have access to get whatever they need, simple counseling for anybody who needs it and nobody being turned away. It's the idea that the agency fills families' needs holistically with almost any needs that they require.
They really care about everybody in the community, no matter what school your kids go to, which shul you're affiliated with. They do everything in a very confidential and very bekavadik way so that people getting the help just feel that they're supported and that they have somebody to turn to.
All of us have unbelievable appreciation for David and for his Yeshus Chayil, that day in and day out, he makes sure that our community has a JFS.
Over the last couple of years, I could certainly say that he's motivated me in JFS and in community activism probably more than any other person. The Rabbi Shalom should continue to give David and his family tremendous shefa so that David should be able to continue to focus his energy and his passion towards organizations like JFS, because we need David to help JFS and to help the community.
The future of the JFS is really dependent on the commitment of the Passaic Clifton community, and as such, we have every reason to believe that the JFS will remain strong and will continue to do chesed for our community for many successful years to come.
JFS has enlarged greatly, has expanded its services, and has tailored its programs to meet the changing needs of the community. Our success, and in fact our very existence, depends on the trust of our clients, the advocacy of community leaders, and the contributions from our donors. JFS is here to serve the community. We're here for you, but we can't do it without you. What are the things that make a difference in a person's life? One of the most fundamental ones is feeling a sense of belonging, feeling that you're part of a community. Those who feel socially isolated, we know, have shortened life expectancies and many other difficulties. But to turn that around is so easy. You extend a hand, you offer a hug, you offer a meal. In this community, there's an abundance of that. Thanks to all of you who've come today, and to all of our supporters, and to our honorees, we can ensure that a safety net of services exists so that we don't have to be concerned that people in our community will fall because you care.
As we begin Sefer Shmos this week, the Torah introduces us to Moshe Rabbeinu in the famous incident that we all learn as children. Despite the new Paro's Gzeira that all males born be thrown into the river, a couple from Shevet Levi, unwilling to comply, hides their son for the first 3 months of his life. Unable to hide him any longer, the child's mother prepares an insulated box and leaves that box in the marsh near the edge of the river. The Torah tells us, "Vateitzatzav achoso merachok, and his sister, Miriam, as we know, stood a distance away to ascertain what would happen to him." As we know, the incident continues. Paro's daughter came to bathe at the river, saw the box, and sent her maidservant to fetch it. When Paro's daughter looked inside and was overcome with feelings of pity for the crying child, Miriam had the opportunity to interject and offered to arrange assistance in caring for Moshe. And so it went in ironic fashion that Miriam orchestrated that her own mother care for Moshe, and he was ultimately taken in by Paro's daughter and raised as her son. Rav Beryl Povarsky, in his Sefer Bat Kodesh, makes the following very poignant observation. We find another very similar episode in the Torah, earlier on in Parshas Vayera, which contrasts this incident in striking fashion. Following Hagar and Yishmael's expulsion from the home of Avram Avinu into the desert, at the point in time when they ran short of provisions, Hagar places her son Yishmael under a shrub. The Torah tells us, "Vatelech vateshev la mineged, harche kimitach vehekeshes." And she went and sat a good distance away, similar to the distance of a bow shot. Ki amra, for she said, "Al ered b'mos hayaled," I shall not witness the demise of the child. Pasuk concludes, "Vateshev mineged, vatisas kola vatev." She sat a distance away and cried. Al ered b'mos hayaled, I shall not witness the death of the child. You can't help but notice the stark contrast between Miriam and Hagar, Rav Beryl remarks. Miriam did not stand nearby because she had any misconceptions that she was aiding in any way in saving Moshe. The pasuk tells us that she simply stood there, l'deya ma'yeh selo, simply and only to ascertain what would be with him. Rav Povarsky explains that this is the lofty madrega we seek to achieve with a Yiddish midah commonly referred to by Chazal as nosei bolim kavero, translated literally sharing in the burden of one's fellow. As Jews, the ideal attitude with which we are to engage in support of the plight of our fellow is to do so despite our own feelings of discomfort or unease. The hallmark of Jewish concern is to express and act on that concern despite a natural proclivity toward discomfiture in getting involved. Even where Miriam couldn't provide any tangible help or assistance, she was present and made herself available to join in the pain and suffering being endured by her brother Moshe, despite the natural discomfort in doing so. In contrast to Hagar's more selfish reaction, that she could not stand to bear witness to her child's demise, Miriam put her own discomfort aside to simply be there and be present while her brother was suffering. At its core, this tenet stands at the very foundation of the Jewish Family Service of Passaic Clifton, an organization that deals head-on with managing the most basic of human needs and emotions, often encountered in their most raw form and at the most vulnerable times in people's lives. No matter how uncomfortable, no matter how awkward, no matter how much human nature might compel one to want to look away or hide, whether in the sphere of domestic abuse, mental illness, joblessness, or myriad other crises, JFS stands with open arms to provide the support, counseling, therapy, advice, and resources, no matter how difficult and no matter how traumatic. Here this morning to offer divrei bracha on behalf of this extraordinary organization is Pasaic's own Rabbi Glasser. Rabbi Glasser is well known in town as the beloved Rav of the Young Israel of Passaic Clifton. Under his leadership over the past 12 years, the shul has grown tremendously in all ways, with countless weekly shiurim, myriad youth programs, and of course their new building, perhaps his ultimate labor of love. To the broader community, Rabbi Glasser is well known for his epic Shabbos Shuv and Shabbos Hagadol drushes, as well as his moving kinnis on Tisha B'Av morning, filling the shul to capacity and beyond with people seeking inspiration and some good humor. Outside of our community, perhaps you'd say in his day jobs, Rabbi Glasser has held positions of great influence in both the OU and now in Yeshiva University. During his many years with the OU, Rabbi Glasser led NCSY programs for teenagers of diverse backgrounds from across the country. In his current position as Dean of Yeshiva University's Center for the Jewish Future, Rabbi Glasser has become involved in shaping communities and training rabbanim and mechanchim across the United States through various programs and national seminars. Rabbi Glasser possesses the unique ability to relate to and connect with Jews of all colors and stripes, and to relate to and address a broad spectrum of matters affecting varying and diverse communities. Without further ado, we call upon Rabbi Glasser to offer divrei bracha on behalf of JFS.
If I would have known that we could make a room like this look like this, I don't think I would have built a new building at the Young Israel. I think we could have just put in track lighting and charged $80 for a steak and called it a day. Bereshus, the Rabbanim who are here, the Rosh Yeshiva who are here, the distinguished honorees, the esteemed professional staff of JFS, this incredible gathering of devoted members of our community. Standing here this morning in the picturesque atmosphere of downtown Passaic, coming together to help our fellow Jews arriving at this beautiful hall this morning, I passed the Passaic Police Department and I was remembered of an experience that I had shortly after I moved to the community. I was here for about a year and I received a call from a lieutenant in the Passaic Police Department asking if I would come make a presentation to the officers at the police department, sensitizing them to issues of the Jewish community. There was a priest, there was an imam, and there was a rabbi. Afterwards, we all went to a bar. No, we did not go to a bar. Imams don't drink, and neither do rabbis of the Young Israel, but that's a separate problem. We'll discuss that another time. So anyway, I had the opportunity to speak to these police officers, and if there's one thing that'll make a rabbi end on time, it's having 30 balabatim with a 32 caliber gun at their side. And I talked all about Shabbos and all about what it means to be part of the Frum community and try to give them a sense of who we are and why we do what we do. And I'll never forget that at the end of the presentation, so one of the officers raised his hand and he said, I heard everything you said about Shabbos, and I explained all the beauty and all the things we can do and can't do and why. He says, I heard everything you said about the Sabbath. I just have one question. So I said, yeah, sure. What's the question? He says, based on what you're saying, why is it prohibited for Jews on the Sabbath to use the sidewalk? Why is it that every other religion seems to find their way to the designated area for pedestrian traffic? And the Jewish people, as I said, it started with the Red Sea. We just go. We just go, and we just sort of expect everyone to kind of move out of the way. But the more relevant story was, the next officer raised his hand, and he says to me the following. He says, I want you to know, Rabbi, that I do not pull over Orthodox Jews anymore. So I said, thank you. So I said, why not? And he looks at me and he says, it's just not worth it. Said, you pull over an Orthodox Jew, and within 30 seconds, there are 4 other cars that have pulled over behind you. They are all out of their car explaining to you why this person did not do what you have pulled them over to do. They were miles away when this light was run, but within 5 minutes, something about the Crusades and the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, and then somebody named Gary Sher is on the phone. It's just not worth it. But the truth is, that kind of captures really what it means when we come together today, because what this morning is really about is the sense of nosei ba'olim chaveiro, the sense of responsibility we feel for each other. This Shabbos, we're going to begin reading Sefer Shmos, the Sefer HaGeula, the Sefer of Redemption. And we know that the experience of redemption is captured, of course, in our celebration of Pesach, Maschil b'genus u'misayim b'shvach. Maschil b'genus, we begin with the experience of oppression and servitude, and it is immortalized into our historical consciousness as much as the exhilarating moments of redemption. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the coming Parshios will come to Moshe Rabbeinu and he will provide Moshe Rabbeinu a mandate. Not only to serve as the advocate for Am Yisrael in confronting Paro to secure the freedom of the Jewish people, but Moshe Rabbeinu is given another role as well. Moshe is responsible for the transformation that needs to take place within Klal Yisrael. From a subjugated and downtrodden people to a Mamleches Kohanim, V'goy Kadosh, and Am HaNivchar that is worthy of Kabbalas HaTorah. And Moshe Rabbeinu will relate the doctrine of redemption to the Jewish people. V'hotzeisi eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim. The slavery and servitude we will begin to read about this week. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, I will extricate you from that reality. V'itzalti eschem, v'ga'alti eschem, v'lakachti eschem, v'hevesi eschem. One recurring formulation after another, defining an existence that is transcendent of what the Jewish people found them within themselves at that very moment. And one would expect when Am Yisrael hears this ambition, this aspiration, Hotseisi, Hitzalti, Ga'alti, Lakakti, that Klal Yisrael would respond, we're in. We're ready to follow you. We're ready to go. Nasa v'nishma. Let's do it. And yet the Torah tells us that the reaction of the Jewish people to this vision of greatness is v'lo shamu el Moshe. They couldn't even hear Moshe. Mikotze ruach, from their shortness of breath, ume'avoda kasha, and from the oppressive work. And the Mefarshim stand in wonderment. What happened here? Moshe and Aaron had developed such sound credibility as loyal diplomats of the Jewish people. Moshe had conveyed numerous times HaKadosh Baruch Hu's intention to redeem Am Yisrael and restore the momentum of building Klal Yisrael to its ultimate potential. Why does Am Yisrael seem to project such a fundamental revulsion to this sense of ambition, of aspiration, Otseisi, Ga'alti? There's going to be a Geula. Why resist? Why hold back? V'lo shamu el Moshe mikotze ruach u'me'avoda kasha. What is the kotze ruach and what is the avoda kasha? So Rashi and the Ramban explain that they both refer to a singular phenomenon, that the Jewish people had reached a breaking point, that their slavery had become so oppressive they could simply no longer tolerate the unfolding process of redemption. No more speeches, no more dramatic moments, no more promises of grandeur and greatness. We need liberation right now. No more nuanced formulations of Geul. As Shamshin Raphael Hirsch points out, They simply lost patience with the process of redemption. And on hearing the Lashonos of Geula, which only accentuated the incremental nature of their unfolding future. But the Meshech Chochmah has a different perspective. The Meshech Chochmah writes, V'lo shamu el Moshe mikotze ruach u'me'avoda kasha. The kotze ruach was their absence of spirit. That Moshe, you're speaking of a new reality. You're speaking of freedoms and responsibilities in the most lofty and ambitious terms. Hotseisi, ga'alti, lakachti. You're presenting an existence that we can't even fathom. The Avdus had not only broken them physically, it had destroyed their spirit. They could no longer envision themselves as anything but slaves. And the promise of redemption fell on deaf ears. To think that one could become so overwhelmed by the vicissitudes of life, by the kotzer ruach of the daily grind, that the mere promise of a greater existence cannot even penetrate one's consciousness. This is human nature. We become accustomed, we become habituated to our surroundings, to our lives, to that which we don't have, to our failures and our challenges, v'lo shamu el Moshe, and we begin to accept those circumstances with those words of failure. It is what it is. Our generation, despite all of its advances in so many areas, remains for so many people an experience of kotzer ruach and avoda kasha. The avoda kasha for many who we care about, many who we love, some of whom I'm sure are in this room, comes from the myriad of emotional, financial, and familial challenges that form a personal Mitzrayim for so many people. And as a result of these challenges, a kotzer ruach sets in, and an ability to perceive even a redeemed existence, a healthy and vibrant experience with serenity and joy that allows one to really live a moment of redemption. One can portray the Lishonos of Geula with persistence and confidence. Just be happy, but v'lo shamu el Moshe. For so many people, they can't even hear it, mikotze ruach u'me'avoda kasha. Because life is so difficult and life is so challenging, and they are left to face their demons on their own, isolated and disconnected from the larger community. And that's why it's such a treasure that in our community we have a group of mental health professionals who comprise an organization that stands for this exact purpose. To not only relieve the avoda kasha, to not only provide the practical, the pragmatic guidance and counseling and resources and support to extricate people from the overwhelming experiences of life, but to confront the kotzer ruach, the truncated spirit that often comes along with feeling that life is just too much and that you have to face it alone. JFS is such a remarkable treasure in our community, one that empowers people to see a new reality, that the challenges of life do not need to define our existence, and that with support, care, and love, people can find their way to a personal geula. The social workers, the therapists, the professional staff, their dedication and devotion is unparalleled. I was personally on the phone 2 hours before Shabbos with Esther East, not about this breakfast. Moshe Lukins had already told me how long I had to speak. V'lo shamu el Moshe. I was on the phone with Esther East because a situation had come up that was completely beyond my capacity to address. And I knew that there was someone I could call. I knew herself and her staff and those that work so diligently would be there to provide the foundation, to provide the anchor to those who need it most. Ashreinu that we live in a community that recognizes the vital work of JFS. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu has sent them the lay leadership whose dedication to our Kehillah simply knows no bounds. Balei Achrayus, who feel an ongoing sense of responsibility, not just altruism, but responsibility of Nosei Ba'olim Chavero to continue to ensure that our community is serviced by the work and devotion of JFS. And how do we, as participants here this morning in our community, play a role in their remarkable work? I want to conclude by suggesting 3 things that we could do. Number one, we can generously support JFS and its programs financially. As I'm sure everyone here this morning is generously fulfilling that role and spending some time hearing of the honorees and their dedication, hearing of the work of JFS, and just sitting in the warm embrace of such a beautiful community, we should all be inspired to contribute further and to be able to ensure that they have the financial backing they need to continue to service our community. Number two, we also can ensure that those in our community that we know need help are aware that the resources of JFS are out there and exist, that people who need help find their way to help. Sometimes you're aware of a neighbor or a friend or somebody in your row in shul who is struggling with something in life, and we just assume that somebody else is intervening and taking care of it to be able to play a role to make sure that those that need help get the help they need. And I think there's one more thing that we could do as well. And that is that every single one of us in this room can play a role in dispelling the stigma that comes along with reaching out for help. That we can create an environment where going to JFS for help is no different than going to an ER for a broken arm. Where we can shape a communal environment that appreciates the pressures of life and that there is no shame in reaching out for help and support. Recognizing that at some point all of us face struggles that require intervention and support. And it is a mark of courage and achievement to reach out for help from a professional and not chas v'sholom a sign of weakness or dysfunction. Not to be so quick to assume that someone who struggles with an emotional challenge is compromised in the world of shidduchim, but rather often possesses the skills and nuance to navigate the challenges of life that we will all face in a deeper and a more profound manner. To try to embrace in our community a normalcy for reaching out for help in all sorts of problems that all of us face on an ongoing basis. We are so fortunate to have such a treasure in our community at the heart of our kehillah. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu continue to bless JFS and all of its staff and all of its supporters for their noble work in bringing us all ultimately to a world of Geula, to a world of true redemption. B'mhei b'yameinu, amen.
As Parsha Shmos continues, the Torah quickly turns to Moshe as being chosen by the Ribono Shel Olam as the Manig Yisrael, and the one who would ultimately lead the Bnei Yisrael out of Galus Mitzrayim. When introducing the Manig Yisrael, you might expect a lengthy biography of Moshe Rabbeinu, perhaps an account of his upbringing, of his academic achievements, of any of his other achievements. Reb Simcha Zisel Mikelem observes that the only thing we are told about Moshe Rabbeinu prior to his being tapped by the Ribono Shel Olam himself as the leader of the Jewish people for the generations is about his overwhelming propensity toward the midah of being nosei b'olam chavero. In exactly 12 pesukim, separating Moshe's being saved by Bas Paro from Hashem's decision to take the Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, the Torah relates 4 incidents. First, Moshe leaves the ivory tower of Paro's kingdom to join his fellow Yidden and observe the plight of his Jewish brethren, who are being oppressed at the hands of the Mitzrayim. Second, Moshe witnesses a Jew and an Egyptian fighting and comes to the aid of his fellow Jew. Third, Moshe witnesses 2 Jews fighting and chastises the aggressor. Finally, the Torah relates that Moshe went to Midian and observed Reuel's daughters being mistreated by the shepherds, whereby he came to their aid. Indeed, the only thing we learn about Moshe Rabbeinu prior to his being spoken to by the Ribono Shel Olam at the Sneh is that he is eminently committed to being nosei b'olam chavero, eminently committed to addressing the needs, concerns, and plight of his fellow man, a characteristic divinely deemed to qualify Moshe as the Manig Yisrael for the generations. The measure of a leader is determined by his inclination toward hishtatvus b'olam chavero. We are privileged this morning to have with us Harav Aaron Lapiansky Shlita, Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva of Greater Washington, and beloved Rebbe of my dear friend David Goder. The story of an American bacher from the Lower East Side, leaving home to learn in Mir Yeshiva in the early 70s and essentially staying forever, has the makings of a Mishpacha magazine article. But it is Rav Aaron's other commitments and sense of Nos Olam Chavero that motivate his presence here this morning. You see, it was Rav Aaron Lapiansky who took a leading role in the outreach and education of Russian Jewry in the late 80s and early 90s. Since relocating to Silver Spring in the mid-90s, Rav Aaron has assumed responsibility for the development of the greater Silver Spring community, reaching far beyond the Yeshiva Gedola. He has taken an active role in and now heads both the boys and girls high schools and has assumed achrayus for steering the elementary school as well. Additionally, Rav Lapiansky is involved in many initiatives affecting the national Frum community. As a founding editor of Klal Perspectives, Rav Aaron is at the forefront of dealing with contemporary issues and concerns on a national or perhaps global level. Most importantly, this morning anyway, is Rav Aaron's sense of Shtatvus B'Olam Chavero as relates to his Talmidim, not simply to their accomplishments in yeshiva, but to their long-term growth and well-being, as well as their contributions and involvement in their communities, wherever they settle, and long after they leave yeshiva. A Talmud related to me this week that Rav Aaron articulated at a Silver Spring alumni gathering some years back, the tremendous nachas he experiences in seeing the way in which his Talmidim become meaningfully involved in their communities, accepting achrayus for the various causes and mosos with which they become involved. David is forever making fond reference to recent discussions he has had with Rav Aaron, or to the way in which Rav Aaron responded to a particular dilemma David had presented. This devotion to his Talmidim B'chlal and to David Befrat is reciprocated by David's overwhelming expressions of admiration, respect, and love for his Rebbe. At this time, it is my great covet to call upon Rav Aaron Lapiansky to present the Goders with the Community Leadership Award this morning.
When I was asked to come, I was given very, very strict warnings about 5-minute limits. I was explained it's not a brisker 5 minutes, no achtel, no shosmanias, no ifs, ands, and buts, 5 minutes, Eastern Standard Time, and Bez Hashem, I had a big dilemma. Should I speak about David and Yehudis, or should I speak about the cause that we're here for? Not that I'm familiar with the details of it, but I know that this is something that's extremely dear to David's heart, and I think I'll use the few minutes for that. I wanted to speak not so much, I've heard the testimony about this organization. Every time I meet David, he talks about a new project and new needs and so on. I want to talk about the word family services and why I think that describes it in ways that other words don't describe it. We make bracha in the morning, personal brachas. Poker Ivrim, Malbish Arumim. Those are all brachas. A person wakes up in the morning and he becomes aware of the fact that he has so many gifts from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, personal gifts. Later on, in Yotze Or, we speak about more sweeping, universal gifts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, light, malachim, Zeriat Stokos, Matzmiach Yeshuos. But the brachas in the morning when a person wakes up is we become, first thing on waking, we become aware of ourselves and what we have in our gifts. There's one bracha that seems to stand out as not really belonging there. We say, Roka ha'aretz al hamoyim. Kadosh Baruch Hu puts land on the sea. And that's something that belongs in the more sweeping Psukei Zimra. I think, and maybe with some Jewish allowance, I remember, Baruch Hashem, we don't live in earthquake-prone country, but I've twice in my life experienced that in Yerushalayim there was an earthquake many years ago, and in Maryland there was a small earthquake. And the sense of helplessness, the sense of not being able to stand on terra firma, it dissolves your entire sense of self. It's not a particular issue. It's like I have nothing because I stand on nothing. On a personal level, the terra firma a person stands on is family. A child that grows up, his sense of being, of standing, of having anything and everything is family. When a father, lo aleinu, can't be a breadwinner, the problem is not only the sense of, where's the meal coming from, but it's bigger than that. The father's ability to provide is a certain terra firma. It's a basis. And when a child senses that his father can't do it, there's an incredible sense of void and limbo. And nothing makes a difference. If a mother becomes emotionally detached from children, family, a child feels he's in a void. There are times when, for different reasons, children become detached from family. And again, nothing is worth anything if they don't have what to stand on. You can't, you're helpless. It's just like, I remember that sense, and it was a minor earthquake, but if you've never experienced it before, you all of a sudden, if there's not an anchor to reality, then everything is collapsing. And that leaves a mark, a deep mark for life, a helplessness, a disconnect. Almost every problem somewhere is rooted in that sense of a lack of solid foundation. On a personal level, I'm in the year for my mother. My parents were Holocaust survivors, and one of the greatest gifts they gave to me was that despite their own loss and having nothing, we always had a sense of family and strength and so on. A ger, the reason why we have so much obligation to reach out to a ger, the Ibn Ezra says the word ger comes from gargir. It's like a solitary unit. It's not part of a cluster, it's not part of a tree or anything like it. So when you deal with families and you understand, and as the presentations and as the speakers and as so many conversations with David, when you understand that there are problems that strike at the heart of a family, and when those problems happen, every single one in the family is a gargir. He's helpless. There's a lack of ability to function totally. And to have the sensitivity to understand it is probably the greatest, I'd say it's much more than chesed, it's the greatest responsibility and obligation we have. I've known David for almost 20 years now, and Yehudis since she married in, and David is extremely close. David always had, even as a bacher, he had a sense of responsibility. Anyone that he felt he's responsible for, he took it like an adult, the sense that he has to take care of it, and an exquisite sense of responsibility for the type of issues we spoke about. It's a tremendous nachas ruach. If there's one message we try to give in the yeshiva, it's responsibility and an understanding of life and social fabric, and to have that sense of achrayus. Every time we meet, every time we talk, it's always about something that's on his shoulders, that he takes a very personal sense of achrayus. It's a tremendous nachas ruach that you and Yudis are being recognized for what you do. It's what we try to give over in yeshiva, and Baruch Hashem, you are most of your own, much more than we gave. Congratulations to you, and ashrecha, and keep doing weiter.
I will be very quick. First of all, thank you, Rav Lopyansky. This was a complete surprise to me. Had I known, I certainly wouldn't have wanted Rebbe to be matriarch this morning. But I very much appreciate you being here. I actually owe an apology to the therapists in the room. In the video, I made reference to simple therapy. Now, Mrs. East, when I spoke to her last week, very accurately pointed out to me that no therapy is simple. And that while intense case management might help those in the greatest crisis, it's the therapy that gives people the tools they need to cope and function on their own. And this leads me to the very first thank you, which is the incredibly dedicated staff led by Mrs. East. Unfortunately, Mrs. East couldn't be here this morning. Baruch Hashem, she's celebrating a simcha, her own grandchild. But we're really grateful to her and the entire staff for the role they play in the community. I also want to thank the board, led by the president, Mrs. Fran Lichtenstein. There you are, Fran. I've observed the board spend hours upon hours of their time committed to the agency and the community, and their incredible commitment deserves our thanks. Thank you to the extraordinary members of the fundraising committee, and I'm going to go through them. Yaakov Brisman, Ezra David, Aaron Foxbrunner, Alan Gutman, Bizi Halberstam, Daniel Paikus, frankly, under the leadership of our General and Commanding Officer, Moshe Lukens. The commitment and Mesiras Nefesh of this group of Yedidim and their spouses is really extraordinary. JFS and the community are indebted to all of you. Specifically to my dear friend Moshe and his Eishes Chayil. You've redefined the meaning of Oskim B'Tzarchei Tzibur, not only for JFS, but for multiple other Mosdos. I don't know how you do it, but whatever the secret sauce is, my bracha to you and your family is that the Rabbanu Shalom give you continued bracha, hatzlacha, and nachas for your extraordinary avodas hakodesh. Finally, a tremendous thank you to everyone in the room and those who aren't in the room, but who really participated in making this campaign possible. Passaic Clifton is an extraordinary community. It's a place, it's been said here before this morning, where people are really nosei b'olam chaveiro. JFS would never be able to function without the support of the entire community and the way the community came together and the way people are moser nefesh is an inspiration to all of us. Thank you all for coming. May we continue to share in each other's simchas, and as Rebbetzin Weissman said on the video, may we quickly be zocha to the Geula Shlema, no longer suffer from the tsaros that require a JFS.
The final part of our program, we are honored, as I mentioned before, to have with us the Honorable Herb Klein. I'll ask Congressman Klein to come up, as well as Rabbi Hirth and Assemblyman Gary Sher for a very special presentation, followed by benching.
When I walked in here this morning, someone asked me if I saw Herb Klein's letter. And he says to me, "How did you become good friends with Herb Klein?" It is with particular pleasure that I share the platform of honorary chairman with my dear friend, Rabbi Heshi Hirth. I mean, I have this black hat. He has difficulty with the yarmulke, you know? Like, I mean, how did we become friends? So, you have an answer?
I have an answer, yeah. My answer is that this man has done a tremendous job serving this community. and that I am very dedicated to the community and appreciate on a personal basis what he has done.
And my answer is that in meeting Herb Klein many, many years ago, I met someone with the Yiddish hearts who really cares, who really takes responsibility for the community, and that's what our friendship is based on, and that's why we're such good friends.
We are.
What are we presenting?
So first and foremost, it's an incredible honor to stand on the podium with Rabbi Hirth. Many of us who have lived in Passaic for 10, 20, 30 years well remember that JFS back then was not what JFS is today. It is a testament to this community, is a testament to leadership from our Rabbanim, from Rabbi Hirth, from our yeshivas, and it's also a testament to those people who laid the foundation for JFS many, many years ago. All of us remember Congressman Klein. All of us remember Herb in the manifold and many ways in which he served the community. In addition to being recognized by JFS, my office took the liberty of getting a proclamation. I'm sure that Herb's wall is filled with proclamations. This proclamation is a little bit different. It is by the General Assembly of the State of New Jersey, to acknowledge what Herb has done, to recognize what he and his Eshes Chayil Jackie have done for this community and the benefits that we've received from it. We all owe him an immense amount of gratitude for being there when others were not. And we owe him an immense amount of gratitude for the service which he has given to the Passaic Clifton community for his many, many years of service in so many ways, not the least of was to serve as a congressman representing this district in the United States House of Representatives. It is a great privilege to stand with Rabbi Hirth. It is a great privilege to stand with Rabbi Hirth in recognition of someone of the quality, magnitude, and dedication as Congressman Klein. Thank you.
My friends here at the dais asked me to speak. I think the best thing I can do is to say I am very surprised. I am delighted to participate in this wonderful gathering and support JFS, and I am very sensitive to the idea that it has been a long morning. Good night.